My fellow Americans, Washingtonians and Skagit County residents, my name is Cody Hart, and over the last year, my organization, Cody Hart for Government Accountability, has had great success holding government accountable at the highest levels across Washington State. In this video series, Skagit County on Trial 2021, I provide just some of the unique insights I've made into how Skagit County government has been operating. And while this video series will be informative, it will also be an opportunity for you, the residents, to act as a trial in judging our government and how it's been operating. And while I will identify what I believe are crimes our government has been committing and true corruption, it will be you, the residents, who will decide for yourselves the guilt or innocence of those involved. And while I hope you participate, I more so hope that you pay attention to your government, because corrupt government will take away all of our freedoms and all of our democracy. So please join me in holding government accountable. So to begin, I'll talk about the format of the trial, and it's going to be broken down into the beginning portion of accusations and evidence. Then I'll be providing some laws for the public, you, the jury, to consider. I will then be requesting a rebuttal from our government officials on what I have found and what the accusations are and concerns are, and allow them the opportunity to provide an explanation for what I appear to have found. And at the very end of it, as mentioned, this will be a trial-style video series where you, the registered voters in Skagit County, will be allowed to vote and determine the verdict, whether you will convict or acquit those identified in my videos. So first, let's start with the accusation and evidence, and explaining that this will be broken down into valuing just two incidences. First, the destruction of public video records, and second, the destruction of ballots at the election office. So the public video records is a subject that I have discussed thoroughly in the past, but for the format of this trial, we will review a number of the items again in the format of the trial we're planning. So the accusations are that multiple Skagit County government officials and employees conspired to conceal the destruction of public video records that were suspected of confirming the illegal creation, processing, and or counting of ballots by election officials. While I suspect it's all of these, we really don't know, and at the very least, it's been reasonably concluded that it was at least one, if not all, of these concerns that they were trying to conceal. So the suspects and what we are accusing people of are the offices of Skagit County Auditor, the offices of the Skagit County Sheriff, and the offices of Skagit County Prosecuting Attorney, Sandy Perkins, Don McDermott, and Rich Wyrich, respectively. So the evidence is very conclusive for the destruction of public video records. In the auditor's office evidence, it contains emails confirming false statements that videos didn't exist, emails confirming that video retention period was known and violated by government officials, and emails confirming that the videos were intentionally deleted. For those who are unaware, during the 2020 election, we had an election operated in a very unique way in which the elections office felt, because of the COVID outbreak, that placing paper over the windows was an appropriate remedy to the COVID situation, which created the question for myself and my organization about what they were hiding behind paper, because it's absurd to think paper is going to stop COVID. And so I pursued video records requests, as you'll see in this email confirmation in early January, and which I'd requested a copy of the audio video recordings of the Auditor's Election Office lobby for the November 4th and 5th. At this time, it was these specific dates I had some very specific questions about, and later on, I ended up requesting it for a majority of the office area. In response, they stated that they had no camera footage of the lobby area, and that was confirmed as a false statement in subsequent communications. This is from Gabriel Clay, the elections supervisor for the Skagit County Auditor, Sandy Perkins. I then would like to point out that I had an in-person conference with both Gabriel Clay and Sandy Perkins. And in that conference, it was found out that there in fact were cameras that existed. And so the records officer and myself were astounded when we found the cameras. And so we confronted her directly, and I will tell you that the elections officer, Gabriel Clay, and the auditor both then confirmed that they were going to change what their belief on the existence of the cameras were, and that while they did have cameras, the footage was all deleted because of the poor quality of footage. This in itself is acknowledging a number of things that are going to be considered criminal acts and when we review the RCWs. So I really want to point that out. So they did change their statements. They made an official statement, and then they changed it about something that was deleted. So, and my organization continued to pursue records about the video surveillance and found out that in fact that the records were supposed to be retained for this federal election of 22 months, and that was known about just weeks after the election. Mind you, the election ended the first week of November, and there was a 22-month retention discussed internally with all of the election officials, Sandy Perkins, the auditor. We have a number of other employees at the Skagit County Auditor's Office and Election Office talking and confirming in this email correspondence that there was a 22-month federal retention for this election. For those who do not know, this is also inconsequential considering that, again, the records were being requested only a few months afterward. There was a state retention of 22 months 18 months that was required, so a year and a half to even follow this minimum state law. You're not allowed to violate either of them, so let's be clear. They don't have the luxury of saying, well, you know, we have an 18-month state policy. We don't care what the federal policy is. That's absurd, and anyone would laugh at you. That is saying that, hey, we in the city don't even have a policy, so we can delete them the same day we record them. That's the same kind of logic they would have you think. And I have heard a couple of people who seem to be advocates for this election office say that that's acceptable, and that is not acceptable at all. Then I'd point out to you that it is confirmed in the email written evidence that the video files were deleted on purpose. This was not accidental. Previously, they'd stated it was due to the video footage of a low quality. Just to be clear, this was an intentional act that is critical when considering the legal implications of what they did. So this is absolutely, it happened at the auditor's office, and so from there we have to move on to where the auditor's office interaction with the sheriff and prosecuting attorney's office for this video deletion occurred, and there was emails that confirmed misconduct and how the evidence that I had gathered confirming this illegal deletion of video footage was handled. There's also email written evidence confirming the refusal of the government officials to perform law enforcement duties as they are sworn to and required to under law. Just be very clear, if you or I had committed something like this and we weren't in government, and then government was told that we had gone and destroyed something, a public video camera footage of something, we would not have the luxury of just saying, hey, we're not going to pursue them. Yeah, no, we don't want to do that. So that's against the law. And the emails support that, as well as emails supporting concerns of conspiracy to prevent a law enforcement investigation. And we'll explain these laws later on, but understand I'm pointing these out for a reason. There was misconduct, there was a refusal to perform law enforcement duties, and there was people in both these offices, all of them conspired when you look at what had happened here. So this all started upon the reporting to law enforcement about what had happened at the auditor's office and the election file. So I will point that out to everybody. As many are aware, it's at this point it's circulated. Quite a few thousands of people in the state, government officials, have reviewed my audit report of how the Skagit County Auditor's Office handled the election. So this is the cover of that report, and it provided extensive detail on the evidence of suspected election crimes. And this is the email on March 2nd that I sent to Mr. McDermott regarding that report and my concerns that the prosecuting attorney's office had people that were implicated, and sharing the evidence with them was a concern to me, and I asked him not to. And I requested an alternate office, such as the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, look into what was going on. And so then the following day, on March 3rd, I got a response. You'll see here that Mr. McDermott had received my email, and he'd reviewed the information from Whatcom County Sheriff, as well as what I'd sent him. Unfortunately, even though I told them that the prosecuting attorney's office was involved, I didn't think Mr. McDermott should be reviewing it. But he was apparently very adamant to make sure he got his eyes on that evidence. And I'm sure that nothing inappropriate happened with his relationship with the prosecuting attorney. But we'll move on, and I'll point out the tone of this. And this is official correspondence from the sheriff, is the Skagit County Sheriff, who just been provided generally irrefutable evidence that crimes had occurred in the county of a significant nature involving multiple government officials. And he was thinking, yeah, we should have someone else look at this. I'm not going to do anything. He points out, if the Attorney General chooses not to investigate, then his hope is that they would contact another uninvolved law enforcement agency. Because guess what? He's pretty much, he's being very clear in the email. He's not going to do anything. He's done. He doesn't feel obligated to do anything. And yet he'll give me a recommendation, even though I'm not the sheriff, that start with the Attorney General's office and see where I go. I think we all know what he was doing. He was trying to stop this thing from going forward. He wasn't going to help it along at all. He felt no obligation to perform his law enforcement duties, and this email generally confirms that. So the following day, on March 4th, you'll see I provided a follow-up regarding the concern, and I will let you know that I filed a internal affairs is what I would call it, complaint against Mr. McDermott for what I had observed his actions and what he had communicated with me, that his lack of sense of obligation for his position. And lo and behold, a few days later, on March 9th, I found out I was right. However, I'll point this out to you that, yes, Mr. McDermott, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, and did coordinate with their prosecuting attorney, and he points out here that Skagit County Prosecutor Service, oh yeah, we shouldn't be involved in this. Well, I told him before, you're a very smart man, Mr. McDermott. You reached out to a law enforcement agency to enforce laws against government officials in Skagit County after you had a complaint filed for the implication of obstructing a justice. I think that, yeah, you were nudged along a little, but I don't think that should have been necessary. And that's why we're having this trial, to point this kind of thing out to everybody and make sure everyone understands what our sheriff and prosecuting attorney's office felt they didn't have to do. They just didn't feel I had to apply any laws here in Skagit County, given their role in law enforcement. So let's talk over some of the laws applicable to the concerns that we found in all of the investigation and records that show the deletion of this public video files. So first, I'll point out is RCW 9A.76.175, making a false or misleading statement to a public servant. Then we have an RCW 9A.80.010, official misconduct. And then we have RCW 40.16.010, injury to public record. RCW 42.20.040, false report. And RCW 9A.28.040, criminal conspiracy. And I think when we read the details on these, it will become apparent how they could apply to the different branches of Skagit County government and the concerns for the deletion of these public video records. So first, making a false or misleading statement to a public servant. I think that I went over a pretty convincing documentation that we have government officials, employees that have all made false statements. And I would say that this RCW is very applicable. I'll leave it for all of you out there to decide who you think it should apply to and under what situation. We have official misconduct. A public servant is guilty of official misconduct if, with the intent to obtain a benefit or to deprive another person of a lawful right or privilege, he or she intentionally commits an unauthorized act under color of law, or he or she intentionally refrains from performing a duty imposed upon him or her by law. Official misconduct is a gross misdemeanor. I sure feel that I've shown the evidence that the multiple government officials here have neglected to do what they should have done. They have acted they've conducted misconduct, and I think this statute really applies between the three offices to multiple officials and multiple situations. And then we talk about injury to a public record, which seems like a funny thing to say, but let's say it out loud. Every person who shall willfully and unlawfully remove, alter, mutilate, destroy, conceal, or obliterate a record, map, book, paper document, or other thing filed or deposited in a public office or with any public officer by authority of law is guilty of a Class C felony and shall be punished by imprisonment in a state correction facility. So it sure seems like the public video files that are the public's record that were supposed to be maintained for years, 22 months, I take that back, 22 months under federal law, 18 months under state law. Yeah, they were injured. Destroyed is what we were told, and they were done so intentionally. So I would really think this might apply to the video record themselves, and who particularly is guilty of this. I think that the public, those reviewing these emails and this evidence, understand who they think likely is should be held accountable. We have a false report. Every public officer who shall knowingly make any false or misleading statement in any official report or statement under circumstances not otherwise prohibited by law shall be guilty of a gross misdemeanor. There's a number of different variations of this. I just thought I would point it out to everyone else. We have multiple officials that have been caught making false statements, in their official capacity, whether it be someone from the election office claiming that a file didn't exist, whether it be someone from the sheriff's office or prosecuting attorney's office, that there was no local referral process, and that they didn't have any obligation to do anything. I think in itself might reveal itself to be a violation of this particular statute. Among many other things that have gone over today. Criminal conspiracy. So understand that I've identified 3 different agencies, multiple people within each agency, if you see those email chains. And did people conspire? A person is guilty of a criminal conspiracy when, with intent that conduct constituting a crime be performed, he or she agrees with one or more persons to engage in or cause to perform of such conduct, any one of them takes a substantial step in pursuance of such agreement. So let's think about this. We have the illegal deletion of public, and this is what we believe. This is what I believe. It's public video file footage. It's yours and mine that was illegally deleted, and I see 3 different agencies here that seem to all have an interest in making sure this doesn't go forward any further for anyone to be held accountable. We have people that are openly saying they aren't going to investigate it in their correspondence. They're not going to be holding anyone accountable, and they're not going to make any referrals for any of those acts that are identified as potentially criminal. And they're all kind of chatting with each other. Kind of seems like a conspiracy to me. And as mentioned in the outline, now each office involved will be requested to provide a rebuttal to alleviate our concerns as a public, to alleviate the apparent misunderstanding. The evidence seems to show that we have government officials at multiple branches of our Skagit County government who are acting in a manner inconsistent with the laws as we understand them, and inconsistent with what we would consider normal behavior by honest people. And it makes them appear corrupt. And I'll present it that way. What we have makes you appear corrupt. And we ask you to please help us restore faith that you are not a corrupt government official and that we have misunderstood this evidence. And please just provide an explanation for what we've come across and what appears to be absolute evidence of your corruption. So that's what we will be doing moving forward. And then also, this is part one. Part two is going to cover mostly brand new material that is expanding upon past investigative efforts involving the illegal destruction of ballots in Skagit County. So I will be issuing that video report shortly. So look forward to that. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, please help fight government corruption. Please do your part to hold government accountable, and our democracy will be better for it. Thank you.